My impressions of the Ultimatum Deadline, a Colt M4 carbine, and the Sig P320 RX this week on Mail Call Mondays. Mail Call Mondays is sponsored by Modular Driven Technologies. If you need a chassis system for your precision rifle, check out mdttac.com. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and this Monday we are going to kind of be all over the place because I am packing up and I am getting ready to leave for TriggrCon in Washington State up in the Pacific Northwest. TriggrCon is actually a trade show that is being held in Seattle. It is open to the public, unlike SHOT Show, so if you guys are in the Seattle area this next weekend, stop on by. We'll leave a link to TriggrCon down in the description below. Before we get to that, I want to talk about some things that we've got going on here. Now, this in front of me is the long-awaited Ultimatum Deadline build. We have got the rifle together. We've got an initial range trip in the books. We've got some initial accuracy done, and I'm going to give you my real quick thoughts and rundown on it. I can tell you right off the bat that while there were some hiccups in the build, the final product that we have here has performed very, very well. Again, on its initial range trip, we're not even 100 rounds down the bore at this point. But the Deadline action is very smooth. It has a very light bolt lift for a 60-degree bolt throw, and it has a really, really smooth bolt throw. Lifting the bolt is very easy to do with just my fingers. Back and forward is just buttery smooth, and it is a beautifully finished bolt and action, and I just expect it to get even smoother as it wears in. Obviously I've got it liberally coated right now with TW25B, just give me a little bit extra smoothing, reduce any chance of any galling or burring, because it is a stainless action, but it is a nitrided action, and that nitride coating tends to be pretty slick, especially when you put some oil on it. So very pleased with the feel on the bolt. Now, I didn't get to take full advantage of the light bolt lift and light bolt feel because I was actually testing this with loads that we developed for the 6.5 Mattson. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't recommend doing that, but it was an informed choice on my part because we are running 41.5 grains of H4350 with 140 grain bowtail hollow point, so it is not a hot load, it's not even an overly warm load, it is pretty equivalent to Hornady factory 140 grain ammunition. So I knew the pressure levels were going to be just fine in a bolt action, they're just fine in a semi-auto. The hiccup there is that ammunition I was just bumping back the neck to be appropriately sized for the 6.5 Creedmoor Mattson. Well, it appears that the chamber in the Mattson is just a little bit more generous than the chamber in the Excalibur barrel that we have here, which is to be expected. So it took a little bit more effort on the bolt handle to lock it down, but that brings forward one of the benefits of the three-lug action in these type of receivers, and that is you have a lot of force when you go to lock that bolt down. So if you happen to get one when you're reloading that slips by you and you get a little bit large cartridge, it shouldn't totally gum up the works. You're just going to have to put a little bit more weight behind it to lock that bolt handle down, and then rock on. So I did go ahead and shoot through this ammunition because we had the primer problems with the primers falling out in the Mattson. I do have quite a bit of ammo that we still have to get rid of, and instead of pulling it down, I will probably just shoot it up in this because of the way the manual bolt action works and because of the pressure curve on it. We're not seeing the problems with the primers falling out on this that we did on the Mattson. So we'll see as we go forward how that works out. Now, the accuracy that I got out of that ammunition, because it is still hand-loaded ammunition to a very, very accurate degree when I'm throwing powder charges, we did get some pretty nice groups downrange. Now, again, these are initial break-in groups for the barrel. And by break-in, I mean we're just shooting. We're not doing any of this shoot and clean nonsense. But the barrel is performing very, very well. We were getting sub-half-inch groups at 100 yards for 5 shots with no problem. Pretty much immediately after I got the scope zeroed, we were dropping some great groups. The Excalibur barrel, I think, is going to be a very, very good performer. This is the cryo-treated barrel, so a lot of you guys asked me about that. I'm on the fence on if cryo-treating really has benefits or not in a PRS-style rifle, but they offered to send us out the cryo-treated version, so since when we test things, a lot of times we like to test the flagship product, we went ahead and rolled with it, and so that is what we have here. It is a 24-inch barrel, and it is threaded on the end, and we do have the MDT brake on here. And of course we are sitting in an MDT ESS chassis with the folding assembly on here, and this guy locks up rock solid. It was just like shooting a fixed chassis while we were actually doing the test, so that worked out absolutely great. You will notice on top here we do have the Night Force ATACR F1 5-25, and there are a couple of reasons behind this. I would really like to at some point put a Tangent Theta scope on here because it is a Canadian action and a Canadian chassis. I'd like to put a Canadian scope on it, and I forgot to mention Canadian trigger. But for testing a rifle, testing a build, you want a known good scope. If you have things that start to go weird, you want to have a baseline to start from. So we know the 5-25 ATACR F1 performs flawlessly. I have neglected to do the full review on this. You've heard us talk about it time and time and time again. But this is probably one of my favorite rifle scopes right now. It has the H59 reticle in it, which just works for me. Some people find it too busy. I find I can get the information that I need out of it. I can ignore the rest. But the dot in the center of the reticle works really, really great for accuracy testing, and the 25 power, of course, works great for accuracy testing at 100 yards. So the scope worked great, performed exactly the way I expected it to, and the zero stops are really quick and easy to set. So when we're dialing it in on a separate platform, I don't spend a lot of time getting the scope squared away. One interesting note that we did run into, though, that I didn't even think about when I was throwing this together, this is a 20 MOA Night Force mount, because this generally works the best on everything. When I'm throwing it on an AR, this works. When I'm throwing it on a chassis rifle, it works. But I forgot that the base on the Deadline is a 20 MOA base. So we actually end up with 40 MOA of incline on here. Now, interestingly enough, the Night Force ATACR has plenty of elevation, so that was no problem getting the travel dialed in. So we are still zeroed at 100 yards with 40 MOA of cant, which means this guy will have plenty of range. I haven't even dialed the turret up to see what my limit of elevation adjustment is, but I will bet we wouldn't have any problems dialing this out to a mile right now with the 40 MOA of cant dialed in. With a 6.5 Creedmoor, running a little warmer ammo than I am right now. This isn't ammo worked up for shooting out to a mile. It's worked up for intermediate range accuracy. But if we decide to go that route, I think we would probably be able to do this. And who knows, maybe later in the year we might roll down to Thunder Valley and shoot out to a mile a little bit with this rig. So action worked great, the barrel worked great, the scope we expected to work great. The chassis system, I really enjoy the feel of this chassis system. Now, obviously, we're sponsored by Modular Driven Technologies, and they were nice enough to send us the chassis out designed specifically for the Deadline action, because there are a few little differences that we'll get into in a later video. But the chassis works. It has a really nice feel to it. It balances nicely with the palm rest in here. We did utilize the RSS spec dovetail rail in here, and one of the Really Right Stuff dovetail adapters on our Harris bipod, or I'm sorry, on our Atlas bipod. We also have one on a Harris bipod that I'm testing as well, but this one here is on the Atlas bipod. It installed very easily. And it makes it very easy to swap this back and forth between the dovetail adapters or regular Picatinny rail. I can also throw this on a Picatinny rail. And that will have a full review coming soon because I found some issues with it, but I also found some things that I really love about it. So something you guys will want to keep in mind if you're looking at the RSS adapters. The brake, I am not recoil sensitive. I utilize quite a few different techniques to make sure I keep the scope on target, getting straight behind the rifle, loading the bipod, all that stuff. So between your average 308 and a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 243, I don't generally notice the recoil difference. But I was recently shooting this at the range with a friend, and he was commenting on how the rifle didn't appear to have any recoil at all. And I stopped and thought about it, and really, on a 1.5 inch shoot and see circle target at 100 yards, the reticle really wasn't moving off that target. I was watching the bullet impact the target, so the brake was absolutely doing its job there. Now when we get this up and start shooting on some barricades, we'll definitely see how the brake performs when we're in more unstable situations. If we start shooting with less support on the buttstock, almost free recoil style, I will really want to see how much the rifle moves at that point. But initial impressions are, even though this brake is bored for 30 caliber and this is a 6.5, it seems to perform very well. It does have a little bit of weight on it, but weight on rifles like this really is not that big of a deal. You're not going to be tromping around in the field hunting animals with it. It's generally going to be carried from firing point to firing point, and this guy will probably be carried on a sling or in a scabbard pack, and no problem at all there. One thing that we did find out with the chassis system is we originally intended to use the MDT carbon fiber forend. Well, the way the carbon fiber forend works is there is a metal cap at either end, an aluminum cap at either end. And this helps protect the carbon fiber, so when you run it into things, the abrasion doesn't start causing the carbon fiber to fray. It also facilitates mounting, obviously. But because the Deadline has this top rail that comes forward quite a bit over the barrel nut, when we tried to mount the carbon fiber rail, the top of the tube interfered with it. If it was raw carbon, I could have just notched it out and moved it back and it would have worked. But since it's a machined aluminum piece, it's not as easy as just notching it out. And I could put it in a mill and have a cutout milled on it. We may look at doing that at some point in time in the future, but the reality is the weight savings between the carbon fiber tube and the standard aluminum tube is not huge. It's probably not something the shooter is going to notice on this rifle. We just wanted to put that on there because it was, kind of a nice looking piece, more of a flagship piece, and it would have fit well on this rifle. But that rail, although it serves a great purpose, allowing you a little bit more adjustment on where you place your scope, it does cause problems and some interference with that. So running the standard ESS forend works much better, either one of the railed forends like we have here, or the flat top works much better for this application. And in fact, in this application, since I'm probably not going to run clip-ons, running the flat forend with no rail at all would even give us a little bit lighter weight overall package. And, it's not really doing anything right now on this rig. So just something to think about if you're planning a build similar to this. We are using Modular Driven Technologies pistol grip down here, and the pistol grip performs very well. I've talked about it before, saying that it's I prefer a little bit more of a vertical profile. This one's swept back a little bit more, but for those of you guys that like more A2 angled grips, this, I believe, is a little bit less angled than the A2, but it is not quite vertical like I like. It does have a really large palm swell on it, which feels really good in the hand if you do wrap your hand around it. And with the angle of the grip and with the thumb ramps that we have here on the side of the ESS, I was able to drop into a very comfortable hand position very consistently, and there were no problems at all there. We are running a TriggerTech Diamond trigger on here, and we had heard some rumors to begin with that the Diamond may not work on the deadline action, and it has worked fine for us. It's passed the safety test. It hasn't dropped on any buttstock slams. It hasn't dropped on any bolt slams. So far for us, it has worked very well. Now, obviously, if you use a Diamond on your build, it's your responsibility to make sure you get in there and you do your safety checks and make sure that the trigger works correctly. But that's for any build. Any rifle build, you need to perform safety checks afterwards to make sure that the trigger does function safely and reliably. The Diamond has this nice flat trigger. I really enjoy the flat trigger. I like the way it feels. I like that they went with a PVD black finish on it, so it really blends in with the rest of the gun overall, and again, looks very nice. I haven't thrown a gauge on this now because, again, we did our burn-in with the rifle, so sometimes there is a little bit of wear. I don't expect there to be a little bit of wear in on the Diamond. I expect it to still be the same weight it was out of the package, but I like to get some rounds down range before I throw a gauge on and get a final weight. And again, when we do the detailed build video, we will talk about the actual pull weight on the Diamond, but it is very light, very crisp. There is no take up. It breaks immediately upon hitting the pull weight. So I really enjoy this trigger. I can't wait to see how well it works in the long run and how well it works when it starts to get dirty and nasty. That is about it on the overview of the Ultimatum Precision Deadline build. There are a couple of little things that I noticed on the build overall, and when we started using it, that I thought was really cool. One thing is, when you do lift the bolt, now because we do have a 60-degree bolt lift here, the bolt ends up almost horizontal, and this is great for hooking it quickly and operating the bolt fast. Additionally, since the bolt only comes up to 60 degrees, you see on the Night Force here, we have this little cattail, this little flipper guy that's hanging out. The bolt is nowhere near it. When we're running a Remington type system, that bolt is a little bit higher, and you run into situations where you can grind your knuckles or smack against this, especially when you're running lower rings. So the fact the bolt comes out and is almost horizontal here gives you a great place to quickly grab a hold of it, and it's very easy to run this bolt quickly. During dry fire, I was getting really quick running the bolt. Again, when we get properly sized ammunition, then I'll be able to run live fire very quickly. So again, just a couple of little things that I noticed. One other thing that we'll get into in the full detail is the bolt release that is over here on the left-hand side. The bolt release is designed so that to release it, you have to push forward on the bolt release and then in. And what this means is you're very unlikely to accidentally release the bolt. When the bolt comes back, it naturally bumps the bolt release back into a locked position. So thumping it, you're not likely to drop it. A lot of times you're walking around on stages or even moving from firing point to firing point. Normally your bolt will be back, and it would really suck to accidentally hit your bolt release, dump your bolt in the dirt while you're on a stage on time. So the fact that when it's to the rear, it does lock that bolt release in. Now, to actually remove the bolt, you just move the bolt forward a little bit, you push the bolt release forward, and you see how the bolt handle dropped there? It's because the bolt is released, and then out it comes. Very easy to actually take the bolt out. When you want to take it out, it's very unlikely that it is going to accidentally come out. Additionally, because of the way this is designed, when you are constantly slamming that bolt handle to the most rearward position, it's not going to peen into this pin. A lot of times when you have bolt stop failures in the field, it's because the pin sheared off and then your bolt stop falls out. Well, here the bolt stop is impacting against the receiver, not against the pin. At least that's what it appears to me looking at the mechanism here. So that should assist in the longevity of the system. And we'll cover that in detail again on the full review. So that is it for the initial impressions of the Ultimatum Deadline build. We will see exactly how detailed we can go into the build here on YouTube, but I've got an idea how to do this project and still comply with their guidelines. We should, and again, this is a tentative plan, we'll see how it works out. We should do a little bit more detailed video over on Full 30. So if you're not subscribed to us over there, make sure you get over there, punch the subscribe button, and we'll post content that is not allowed here on YouTube over on Full 30, in addition to all of our regular content. So that is it for that. Let's move on to a personal project that I put together, and that is this guy right here. This is a Colt M4. This is something that I kind of pieced together over a little while. The upper receiver, I came across a gun shop that was selling surplus upper receivers. We actually used this when we were doing our bore cam video, or our bore cam review, and the barrel was looking pretty harsh, but we ended up taking a trip through an ultrasonic cleaner, which again is a review video that's coming up soon. Cleaned it all out. I went ahead and punched the bore, and we kind of put it aside and waited a little while. Well, Brownells was nice enough to run a sale on Colt M4 carbine marked lower halves, and that is the entire lower half, complete lower receiver, pistol grip, and buttstock. So I really couldn't resist. I went ahead and picked one up, and because it is a Colt upper receiver, and now it is a Colt M4 lower receiver, this is a complete Colt M4 rifle now. Now, those of you guys that are big military surplus guys or big military weapons guys, you'll know that there's one glaring problem with that. The regular issued M4 upper receivers have a 14.5-inch barrel and an A2 bird cage. Well, that would make this a SBR, a short barrel rifle, under the National Firearms Act. I didn't really want to go to the trouble of registering this as an SBR for the very, very tiny amount of overall length savings that it would get, because I want to keep it very close to an issued rifle. So to counteract that, it was really easy. I went ahead and took off the regular A2 bird cage, threw it in my bench over here, and I bought an extended A2 from Bravo Company. Went ahead and installed the extended A2, and the really nice thing about these extended A2s is they already come with the pinhole drilled in the bottom of the flash hider. So it's very easy to go ahead and drill, pin, and weld the flash hider on for a permanently attached assembly, and that permanently attached extended A2 gives me a legal 16-inch overall length for this rifle. So you'll notice a lot of times when you see M4 profiles with 16-inch barrels, the barrel looks really goofy. It just looks too long when you're looking at it. And that's because a lot of us have been looking at M4s or this barrel to front sight base configuration, because that's about the same length as on an A2. That really just, it looks goofy as can be. So this way we got to keep the original contract barrel. We are a legal overall length, and you know, the simplest thing is just to pay a $200 tax and SBR it, but I just had an issue with doing that and then having a rifle that I have to ask permission to take across state lines. So this way it's good to go. It's a legal 16-inch overall, and now I have about as close to a issued M4 as you can get. Of course, it still is missing the happy switch. If this was a registered machine gun, then the barrel length issue would be irrelevant, because registered machine guns can be any barrel length you want. But again, I didn't have an extra $16,000 to $20,000 laying around to go with a full auto, so this gets me very, very close to the issued gun. Now, the question I have for you, because I took this guy out, did some shooting, even with the horrendous 8-pound GI trigger that is on it. I did some iron-sighted shooting, got it zeroed in with irons. We did some close and fast work, and then I did some longer range shooting, banging steel plates out to 300 with it. And it is just a blast to do so, but I really want to work this guy up as a clone of a Marine Corps issued M4. And in order to do that, that's going to require that I put a TriggrCon on it, specifically a TA31. So I kind of want to hear from you guys. What would you rather see? Would you rather see this thing stay as irons, or would you rather see it go ahead and get totally cloned out as a Marine Corps M4 and have a TriggrCon TA31 and the Knights Armament rear sight? I already have a Knights Armament foregrip coming for it. So I really want to hear how you guys would like to see us set up. One thing I did put on it that deviates slightly is this is a blue force gear sling. I believe the issued slings are the non-padded version. I went ahead and got the padded version just because I have two non-padded blue force gear slings, and I wanted to see how much I liked the padded sling. And so far it's worked pretty well. I really like these kind of slings where you can quickly adjust them. If you have QD sockets, the Magpul slings like the MS4 are a great option. If you're not running QDs, like we're not running QDs at all on this, I wanted something light and simple. So it attaches through the buttstock hole and attaches on the front swivel. Then the Blue Force Gear sling is a great deal overall. So that is my pet project, the Colt M4 carbine. Now, one last thing, actually got about two last things that we'll talk about here. This is something that I have been working on now, again, as a side project. This is the Sig P320 RX. This is the civilian version of the M17. It doesn't have the thumb safeties, but this is almost exactly the pistol that they are issuing, with the exception, again, of the optic. Now, the reason that I picked up the Sig P320, first of all, is because it is going to be the issue pistol of our armed forces. I wanted to get some time on it and see how it felt. I have shot the X5 previously. I wasn't really a huge fan of the way the X5 felt. So I picked up the 320 RX to get a little bit more time on the platform, get a little bit more adjusted to it, and see what my opinion was after some extended practice. You always have to be careful of first impressions because they may not be the most correct impressions. Sometimes they are, but it's always good to give something a second shot and see how well it works overall. The other reason I really wanted to check this out is because I have become to be a proponent of optics on law enforcement handguns. The problem currently is just about any other platform that you get, if you wanted to do a widespread issue of them, then you have several different part numbers that you're going to have to manage. You're going to have to get them in. Armors are going to have to build the pistols up by taking the base pistol and adding various components, and then they're going to have to maintain that whole process. Through going through law enforcement acquisitions before, very often the wrong parts show up, things get lost in translation, and most cops are not gun guys, so they know to do what they're told to do with the weapons. So you can run into some significant problems. The reason the P320 RX attracted me is because it is a one-part number solution. If a department wanted to go with optics-equipped handguns for their officers, they could choose this one-part number, issue the one-part number to their officers, and be good to go. It accepts a Surefire X300. Safariland makes holsters for this setup. So overall, you have a law enforcement level handgun, you have a law enforcement level 3 holster that you can go into. So if a department wanted to go an optics equipped route, they could just order a pistol with it on and be good to go. Now, this is not an endorsement of the P320 RX for law enforcement. I haven't got enough time on the gun. I haven't beaten it up enough to be able to give that kind of endorsement, but it definitely shows some promise. There are some things that need to be resolved that I have already planned to do. One is I've talked to a SIG Optics rep, and hopefully I should have the shroud. They make a metal shroud that goes over the RX now that gives it a little bit more protection from drops and the banging around that you'll see in professional use. It's very easy for private firearms owners to baby their equipment to make sure it's taken care of well. But when you go into professional environments, equipment is treated a whole lot more harshly. Now, you can claim right or wrong, whichever way, it is what it is. It's a fact that issued gear gets beat up. So being able to put a little bit extra armor on this guy should help with the longevity, and it will help when we go through our testing. We start doing one-arm manipulations and banging the optic around. Hopefully it will extend its lifetime a little bit. Over the handgun itself, the trigger I was initially not a huge fan of. This is a post-upgrade handgun. So this has already had all the internal work from the Sig voluntary upgrade program. It came from the factory already set up like that. I didn't have to send it back and get it upgraded. So all the jokes about dropping it, you can make them if you want, but this should be drop safe now. I'm not going to drop it a whole lot to check it out, but who knows, once we get a little bit deeper into our testing, I may go ahead and load up some cartridges with just primers and drop it and see how the post-voluntary upgrade works, rigged out the way this is. We also have some components in from Gray Guns. They were happy enough to send us out one of their flat triggers and one of their guide rod assemblies and an X-Carry grip with their laser stippling. All really, really interesting products that once we get done with the initial base pistol, we'll be throwing those upgrades in and then running it and seeing what kind of change it makes in the handgun. Again, one of my primary concerns is to see how well this will work as a law enforcement handgun. So we don't want to go in and make a bunch of changes right off the bat because that generally will not be allowed in a law enforcement environment when we're talking about issued guns. Although the Sig does make a really interesting argument for that because of the modularity of the P320, I don't really see any reason that an individual officer could not swap the grip module out for one that better fits them or feels better to them because it doesn't actually change the function of the handgun itself. So that in itself brings up some really, really interesting arguments. There's some other arguments that I will save for the full review about situations where this gun would be a great option to be able to convert it to whatever mission happens to be at hand. But that is what we are working with right now. I'm really kind of pleased with it to begin with. The issue that I have is every time I take it out to the range, I have to acclimate to a different grip angle because it is a different grip angle from the Glocks that I normally carry and shoot. This may be a pro or it may be a con depending upon your individual circumstances. You can go on the Sig forums and you can read all kinds of stuff about guys that love the grip angle or guys that hate the grip angle. I have learned to adapt to whatever handgun I have to pick up and shoot. So it just takes me a few seconds to recalibrate my brain and then drive on. If you're a competition shooter at a high level, obviously you want to stick with the same grip angle because it does matter when you're looking at the shot timer. So that is it on the initial thoughts on the P320. I think it is a really good feeling pistol so far. I don't think I'm going to give up my Glocks for it yet, but I'm not regretting the purchase at all. And I did go ahead and purchase that with our own money to give it a try. So you're getting my complete unbiased opinion. You would anyway. But guys like to know if something's being provided by a manufacturer or if we picked it up on our own. Now, something that we did get from a manufacturer is Armageddon Gear and Reezer Precision were nice enough to send us out a couple of their Gamechanger bags. This is the waxed canvas, and it is really a slick bag. We've got waxed canvas, we've got a nice leather handle here, and the Gamechanger bag is slick because this two-lobe design allows it to go across a barricade and grip the barricade and then give you a flat spot on top to put your rifle across. So instead of having your rifle acting like a teeter-totter, it's like you're sitting the rifle on a table, and that gives you quite a bit more stability. In fact, guys are running almost free recoil with these bags on top of very narrow barricades. You could throw this up on a bar, on a sheet of metal, all kinds of stuff, and it works really well. So that I was expecting. I've shot Gamechangers in competition before. They're usually larger than this, and we have two of the larger Gamechangers that we'll be talking about later, but I really wanted to concentrate on this guy because while I was out shooting this thing for accuracy, this is what I was using. Now I was using it bipod prone. I just grabbed this guy and used it as a rear bag. You initially would not think that you could use this as a rear bag, but it actually works really, really well because you can drop it down and put your buttstock right between here, and you can still squeeze the lobes to adjust the height of the buttstock. If you're in a situation where you need to deploy that bipod a little bit higher, you can just turn it on its end, and then there you go. And the buttstock's in the top end. The only drawback to this is it is a little bit heavy. It does basically feel like a sandbag. They've got some heavy fill that is in here. That benefits it when you're using it on a barricade. It definitely benefits it when you're using it as a rear bag, because when you pack it in, it feels really nice and solid. The one drawback is this is going to be like a brick in the bottom of your bag when you're hauling it around. So you do have to pay to play, and sometimes you pay with pain. So it's going to be heavy, but I'm going to give this guy a run for quite some time. I'm really impressed with this bag. I can't wait to see how well it works when we're shooting it on barricades versus the larger bag. So I'm going to have to do some tests where we go head to head, and then we'll come back to you with a full review on this. But I think I don't know how I feel about the waxed canvas. It is kind of cool looking. It's got that old world kind of feel to it, and it will definitely take on a patina of its own. But I think I would almost prefer a more durable ballistic nylon. So we'll see, or not ballistic nylon, I'm sorry, Cordura. I would almost prefer something like 1000D Cordura. So we'll see as we go along how well it wears. The leather handle, again, really nice touch, but if it gets wet and soggy and stays wet and soggy, that thing is going to be a serious issue. So we'll see. We'll take it to a couple of matches. I'm sure I'm going to get caught in the rain at a match or two, and we'll see how it survives that, and we'll report back to you. Now, lastly, we're talking about going to TriggrCon. This is going to be a little bit of an interesting TriggrCon because I'm going to attack it in a slightly different way. Normally, I go and set up a tripod and we set up a camera, and like, for instance, when we are shooting the SHOT Show, I have Sarah, my lovely wife, as my camera woman. She keeps me in check. She keeps the camera running, makes sure it's pointed correctly, and does all that fun stuff. But she will not be able to go with me out to TriggrCon. So on this one, it's going to be a one-man show. I'm going to be running and gunning and doing everything on my own. So we're trying out a little bit of a new rig. And this is the guy I will be taking with me out to TriggrCon. This is a Canon 80D, and this just has the kit lens. It's an 18-55. That's not really my first choice. If this kind of works for me, I'm going to put a different lens on here for future events, but I didn't want to dump a ton of money into it before we saw how well this worked at an actual event. I do have this is actually a Movo mic on here. I'm normally using a Rode Video Micro, but the Movo gives me a little bit hotter signal, which works better with the Canon cameras. The EOS 80D is an upgrade from my previous EOS 60D, and that this guy will do full-time autofocus while I'm shooting video. And the reason this is a game changer for me and will work in this kind of setup is because I can just hold the camera out and do this thing vlog style, and it will focus and do its own thing. And if I have to switch around and I have to show something, then it will autofocus. Now, most of the stuff that you see us do, like this show right now, the camera is in full manual mode. The camera is not doing anything on its own. I'm controlling everything before we punch the record button. Most of the stuff that we do out in the field, same way. I am controlling everything, including the focus point on it. But this should allow me to run and gun a little bit faster, a little bit more easy, and it does have fantastic autofocus. The Canon autofocus system is one of the best in the industry. Now, this guy we have on the bottom here is a Joby GorillaPod. It's kind of the de facto standard for vloggers because it does give me a little bit more reach, but I can fold the legs out and I can set it up as a regular tripod. So that makes it really quick to set up. I can slap it down where I need it to. I can wrap the tripod around posts, around whatever, and then I can talk to it. And the 18mm lens lets me get a ton in. So I should be able to stand and talk to a rep and hold this thing out and get everything. Now, it's got stabilization. It's not the greatest stabilization. My Panasonics have better stabilization, but they don't have the fantastic autofocus. So it's a little bit of a trade-off between the two cameras. But this is the rig that we'll be running out there. So if you see me running around with a dead rabbit on top of my camera, that's what's going on. And believe it or not, I get more comments about these guys. They're actually called dead cats than anything else. The windscreen attracts more attention. I have to actually pull the thing off if I'm trying to go low profile because everybody's attracted to it. Otherwise, it just looks like your run-of-the-mill vacationer's camera, but I throw this stupid thing on top and everybody wants to know what's going on. So just a little inside tip for those of you guys that are budding cinematographers and videographers. If you run around with a dead cat on your camera, everyone will notice. You pull the dead cat off, your sound's going to suck, but nobody will pay attention to the camera. So that's all we've got for this Mail Call Mondays. As always, if you have any questions for anything that we've covered on this Mail Call Mondays, leave them in the comments section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. As usual, as of late, this Mail Call Mondays is getting out a little bit late. I apologize for that. Hopefully, after we get through the TriggrCon stuff, we'll be able to get things out a little bit quicker and get out the filler content that comes in the middle of the week. So that's it for this Mail Call Mondays. If you like the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot.